To get everyone started, if you would kindly share your PTA, give your PTA a shout out in the chat. And if you can answer in a word or a phrase, an image that you could think of that would describe why does DEI matter for your PTA. So quickly in the chat, give a shout out to your PTA or PTAs if you have children in different levels, schools, different schools. And just give me a word, a phrase that would describe why does DEI matter. And thank you to Shelley and the Executive Committee of Seminole County Council PTA for this opportunity to do this presentation today. So let's go on the chat while I share my screen.
And Minnie, just in the chat, we did have a question pop in on what is DEI.
Okay, we're gonna, thank you. DEI, I'm sorry, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I would like to share that this information, this content was created by Helen Westmoreland, who is the National PTA Director for the Center for Family Engagement, Sylvia Reyna, who is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee Chair, and Frances Frost, who was part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. So this presentation, I actually sat on this training as a National PTA DEI Fellow, and so as part of my fellowship, I wanted to focus on being able to identify resources and, of course, sharing resources. This is the heart of Seminole County Council PTA, to really help local units learn how to best navigate what is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So when we talk about DEI, we are really talking about what the overall mission is for PTA. We are in this, and I've heard it said time and time again, PTA is an advocacy group first, right? And so being an advocacy group, we are advocating for all children. I loved Florida PTA's tagline a few years ago, all children are our children, todos los niños son nuestros niños. And in that experience, it really helped center me as I continue to develop as a PTA leader. We are doing this for the students, families, communities that we are serving. And so as you see in the last line, more voices equal more hands equal a better experience for all of our students. So if I'm peeking down, I'm going to be navigating your chats on my cell phone, okay? So when we talk about diversity, I see from Millennium, Eastbrook, equal advocacy for all, inclusion, so that everyone can feel included, equality and inclusion for all. So thank you all for your feedback. It matters because meeting the needs of all students matter. Learning about other cultures, I love that, because we can't talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion without there being a learning opportunity and experience. So the objectives today, oh gosh, I'm sorry. Defining the concepts of DEI, analyzing the diversity level of inclusion and equity in membership, governance, programs, and advocacy. And we will talk about this a little bit more. The understanding today is that I have 30 minutes, and this is really a lifelong discussion. So we're really just going to be scratching the surface. And so I asked just from the get-go, lots of grace and lots of patience. Your feedback is absolutely welcome. Rachel will put emails in the chats for me, and Shelley as well, so that we can continue this conversation, learning more over time what your needs are in terms of your specific school and your specific community. And then of course, what are those strategies so that our PTAs can really be reflective of our communities that we serve. What is diversity? Diversity is then the representation of and respect for people from different backgrounds and identities. And one moment here. Inclusion refers to the actions, behaviors, social norms that ensure that all people feel welcome, safe, and that they belong. Why is this important? It's important because we can create the best activities, we can have the best marketing, the best branding, but if the community and the families that we're serving don't feel welcome enough to participate, then we are failing to hit the mark. When we speak of equality, we're talking about providing fairness in resources, opportunities, and outcomes so that all communities get what they need to be engaged and successful. And I know the term equity may be new for a lot of us here. I know that I had to do a lot of digging deep, and it was part of my DEI fellowship learning experience to really find out what's the difference between like being fair across the board, everybody gets the same amount, versus being equitable. Sometimes there are groups that really need a little bit more to be as successful as a group or a cohort not in the same demographic. So that's something that we're going to keep in the forefront as we move through this presentation. We believe that diversity is our strength. And again, this is just an overarching theme that represents the PTA. And so back on the chat, what is one way that diversity shows up in a PTA? Specifically, we're talking about diversity. We'll have an opportunity to chat about inclusion and then equity. But what is one way that we see diversity? And again, you can speak from your PTA, or you can speak from a point of, gosh, this is what the best case scenario of diversity would look like in my PTA. So go ahead on the chat and tell me what we see. I see right away, men represented in the PTA. Multiple languages, keep them coming, friends, keep them coming. We as a PTA, we represent so many different groups. More students, absolutely. Making every child's potential a reality really does entail speaking to and addressing the diverse needs of our communities. Cross-cultural exchange, absolutely. Every one of us in this presentation, all 59 or 60 of us, bring to the table and represent such beautifully different, diverse subgroups, whether it's our gender, whether it's our family of origin, whether it's the makeup of our family. And all of those experiences that all 60 of us bring really do inform the work that the PTA does. LGBTQ+, absolutely. We believe that collaboration must be inclusive. So again, in the chat, what is one way that inclusion shows up in the PTA? We don't PTA in a bubble, right? This is all about reaching far, reaching up, reaching out. It's about the families in our school. It's about collaborating with the administrators and the teachers of our school. We are a PTA, and many of us are PTSAs. It's the voice of the parents, the students, the teachers, the staff, the community partners. Everyone together is working together to really help promote that child reaching their potential. Materials written and spoken in Spanish and English. Membership open to every parent. Equal opportunity. And so you do see, I believe, and Shelley, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that 100% of, there's a huge, females far outweigh the male participation even in this training this morning. Is that correct? I don't know the exact numbers, but
yeah, that's accurate.
Thank you. It's one of those things where it's not that alternate parents don't care, dads don't care, grandparents don't care. It's that sometimes there is room to be creative so that the dynamic can change for or be open to other parents, guardians, friends, people who really do care about children reaching their potential to be able to be a part of this. We believe that equity drives our mission. Let's talk about equity, making sure that children, all children, acquire what they need to be able to be successful, providing fairness in resources, opportunities and outcomes so that all communities get what they need to be engaged and successful. And again, it's important to stress that it's not always equal across the board. And so just for a trivial example, it's not to say that every school is going to get $1,000 because we're being fair. $1,000 may be exactly what one school or one PTA needs, while another may need $2,000, while another may need $3,000. And that's okay. But it's about being intentional so that we can understand what a specific community needs for whatever the reason is. And I know our minds always go to economic disparities, and that is a huge part of the conversation, but sometimes it's just parent involvement. Sometimes our programming, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but sometimes our programming, the assumption is there's at least one at-home parent. And so the PTA has often fallen into programming during the day. Well, is that really an equitable move for family engagement when perhaps a specific school, a specific community really does need evening, or dare I say Saturday programming, so that they can have an equitable chance to be involved and engaged in their child's PTA? Hybrid meetings, absolutely. Thank you for that. We've seen, and Shelley has mentioned, like, our PTA work will never be the same because COVID has given us this opportunity to explore. And I've seen, in my opinion, lots of silver linings where perhaps even today, right here, right now, I have three children and a puppy here. And for me to participate means that PTA is giving me a space and grace for me to be able to kind of just set up my children safely in my home, but still be available and to lend an ear versus me leaving for 5 hours out of my home and perhaps not having childcare for my children. So we don't think about it perhaps, but virtual and hybrid opportunities really have been, in my opinion, a beautiful alternative to engaging other families. The journey, the PTA DEI journey. This is where I see someone's cooking lunch right now. This is awesome. The PTA DEI journey. This has been, for me, the cream of the crop. This is what has really given me this perspective where it's a journey, and at some points, depending any given topic, I may be in one stage, in between stages, or it has been easy for me to identify where I would like to be. So Rachel, and just after I finish this description, I would like for you to launch the first poll about where everyone finds themselves on this journey. So just to go through everything, at the beginning stage, PTAs are colorblind or identity blind, either by design or default, and do not lift up issues of diversity, inclusion, equity in any regular or routine ways. We would say that's the beginning, like, we're all together, we're as one, without the intentionality of saying, we have families that represent this culture, or we have families that are represented in this way, or we have special need families that have sensory issues that need to be addressed, okay? So when we talk about the beginning stages of the PTA DEI journey, we're talking about just counting everyone as one without the intentionality of saying, we have different subgroups represented, and those subgroups are valuable. Okay, when we talk about the emerging stage, we talk about PTAs being focused on recruiting and building membership and leadership that is comprised of individuals from different backgrounds and experiences. To use examples that were provided in the chat today, yes, is your PTA, right? Is your PTA, are you as a PTA leader truly focused on saying, what can I do to maybe by the next 2 years, for example, include or recruit one male executive board member, or one committee member that would be a grandparent, or somebody from the community, or somebody that speaks a different language that could help us to best tend to language needs and language barriers of PTA members represented in my community. The intermediate stage, we have PTAs that are focused on cultural and creating an environment in which everyone is comfortable sharing and contributing those experiences. And I must say, and you saw on my description earlier, I do represent right here, right now, Crystal Lake PTA Elementary School. I did have the pleasure of working with an amazing team a few years ago where that was part of our mission for that year. We wanted to intentionally celebrate cultural diversity at our school. So the way we did that was we first invited parents to come to a roundtable discussion. No, we didn't have 500 people showed up. We had about 12 to 15, but within that group, and Madam President was part of it too, but within that group, we shared such amazing stories about family of origin, and not just that, it crossed to talks about family traditions and even religious identity and family traditions that really helped inform the rest of our work for the year in terms of cultural diversity and celebration, as how was our tagline, celebrating diversity is so much fun at our PTA. And it started with just a world map, and we created a line that said, celebrating diversity is so much fun, place a star where your family is from. And we had this big, beautiful map, and there were stars all over the world, and people were able to say like, oh my gosh, your family's from here, so is mine. Oh my gosh, I didn't know you were from here, tell me more. And so it opened up this beautiful opportunity for even our students to talk amongst themselves and celebrate where each other's families were from. And then we talk, and then there is the advanced stage where PTAs are really focused on systems that would target equity, and that they want it to really inform all of the work that's being done within a specific unit. So Miss Rachel, if you're ready to blast the poll, this is, again, anonymous. This is just for us to really kind of understand. Question 1, if you can do, what stage reflects your PTI's DEI efforts? And we'll give you guys like 30 seconds. If you can just do the first one now. What stage reflects your DEI efforts? And then Rachel, tell me if you can inform the group how many seconds they have to get their answers in.
Okay, we're having a small bit of technical difficulty.
It's working on my end. I'm being I'm being the VP of the VPs. So we have about 41% that have voted. So we only have like 24 people voting.
Is it okay if they answer just the first one, or do you want them to go ahead and do the second one as well?
They can answer just the first one.
Okay. Which stage reflects your PTA's DEI efforts?
And this is anonymous, so no judgment here.
This is just a snapshot for all of us together as a county to be able to look and just see where we all are. There's absolutely no judgment. Everybody has to start somewhere. I find myself beginning, depending on what topic, emerging in another, intermediate in another, and advanced in another. And so this is all part of the journey.
Okay, I'm gonna give it another 20 seconds.
20 seconds, friends. And then you can feel free to post, Shelley.
Okay. So I'm gonna end and share.
Okay, let's focus just on the poll survey of question 1. Which stage reflects your PTA's DEI effort? And this is fantastic. 24% find themselves in the beginning, 34 emerging, 42 in intermediate, and 0 at advanced. And even that's beautiful, because you know what? It gives us room to grow, and it allows us as a county to be able to say, this is where we can focus our resources, our attention, our collaboration with you guys. So thank you so much for sharing that information. If you can close that poll for me, Shelley. Thank you so much. Know your school and PTA data. This really is like the first step. Before you plan any event, I would say sit with the data. And so if we can put back up that second poll question, Shelley, and then you set the time clock. If you have not answered the second poll question, once it's up, Okay, so the second poll question is how well, and if you already answered it the first time, if you can kindly do it again a second time, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. There's 3 responses. How well do you know your school and PTA demographic data? Choice 1, I have never seen my school's demographic data, nor do I know how to access it. Choice 2, I have access to my school's data, but do not know what it means. And number 3, I review the school's demographic data each year. And then Shelley, if you can give us the poll countdown.
We're getting faster now. So we're at 29:30. So I'll give it a couple more seconds.
All right. Thanks, everyone. As we wrap up this poll, I will share my personal answer is I review the school's demographic data each year. And the way that I do that is I reach out to admin and I ask them for just the general data, in my case, Crystal Lake Elementary School. It's data that tells me how many students are enrolled, and it's broken down into male, female, cultural breakdown, and it also gives me really important data about students with disabilities, including students that have 504s. This has just allowed us, and Shelley, whenever you close it, you can. Awesome. Okay. 45% have never seen the school's demographic and don't know where to access it. 24% have access but do not know what it means, and 30% review it each year and it informs their work. Fantastic. Have no fear, because this is, again, DEI is all about a journey and it is constantly moving. We're constantly moving. So there are 2 key ways in my experience to secure demographic. In my case, I go specifically to the school and I ask admin for them to share the general non-privacy violating demographic data. I share it with my board, and it helps us to just determine how many need translation services, perhaps like at Crystal Lake, there's 27 to 29% Hispanic families in the school. So we felt that that was a significant chunk of families that could benefit from translation into Spanish. Another was the numbers that reflected the students with disability. And so our other key focus when we spoke about DEI, besides cultural celebration, was also students with special needs and sensory. So we adapted our programming. For example, STEM night, we partnered with an ESE teacher to come up with a sensory lab room specific for the students. So that is great collaboration between PTA and the school and teachers specifically. So we had the lighting, the scents, the sounds, everything was very safe for them under the supervision of highly qualified volunteers and teachers there. Another way that you can find your school's demographic is through the Florida Department of Education. And I recently visited that to review the demographics of another school in our county. And I tell you, it talks about the absenteeism rate. You can do it by race, you can do it by gender, academic achievements, student receiving services. You might have to dig a little bit deeper, but the graduation rates, this is all data that can really help each local unit determine what type of programming is really needed for the school. And I have to pause and say that with intentionality, because a lot of times PTAs have inherit programming, and this is not a critique on any specific event or program. It really is not. However, I will say sometimes we create programming because it's been inherited and because it's been tradition, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's fitting the needs of the community that you're serving. And so I really would encourage you to take the time with your board, even your administrators, and say, this is our plan of work for the whole entire year. Will this program, will this event really best serve the families that we're serving? And it can be as simple as, will we have translation available? Will we have childcare available? Is it at the right time? Is it at the right place? Will it require food? Because the families, the time that it's going to be held, single parent families won't have time to kind of juggle dinner, coming to an event. All of those things is data, are important factors that need to be considered. Knowing your community. I love this slide because as beautiful are as beautiful as all of the groups are represented here, from English language learners to essential workers, high schoolers, military families, special education, the white hexagons or the blank hexagons really are our opportunity to dig really, really deep. And what's so beautiful about this DEI journey, and specifically in Seminole County Council, is that one hexagon for Crystal Lake may be unique to Crystal Lake, whereas for Millennium, I'll use the schools that my children go to, Millennium may fill in a hexagon in a completely unique way to Millennium Middle School. And so here's an opportunity, if in the chat, if you were to fill in a hexagon for to describe your community, go ahead and just put in the chat something that you have recently discovered or have historically discovered that is unique to describe the community that you serve. And as we continue this discussion, the underrepresented groups of your PTA really are the cream of the crop. Like, it really is a unique opportunity that we are given to sit and learn, And sometimes it goes beyond the data. Sometimes you don't learn about the needs that your communities have until you actually build a relationship with them and have conversations. There was one unique need that I learned of a school volunteer, and it had to do with a medical need. And this parent asked if we could share about, it was specifically epilepsy awareness. And this parent asked if our PTA could do a post on just medical and specifically Epilepsy Awareness Month. And again, I only knew that because she felt comfortable because we had worked together at the school. That's not data necessarily that I could find easily per se. Nonetheless, it's important data because it has to do with sensory and stimulation and having a plan. If this child were at one of our events and there was something that this child and this family needed medical attention, that we would be prepared and be able to plan to best serve this family. So if you guys have come up with or been able to identify underrepresented groups in your PTAs, please let us know in the chat. Identifying barriers in your community. Again, there's cultural, social, economic, institutional policies, relevancy of issues. What is specific and unique to my PTA may not be for your PTA. And dare I say, the PTA issues vary from elementary to middle to high school, right? And I'm sure you guys all can chime in. I have zero experience in high school PTAs, but I do pay attention, and I see that the topics, they get a little bit more mature. They obviously get more intense, and that's just developmental progression, and that's wonderful. We've spoken a little bit about culture, social, economics. I'm so thankful that the county has already approved, the district has already approved the free meals for the students for the next economic years. That has been a blessing because we all know that COVID has impacted our lives in such a great way. I'm going to continue for the sake of honoring times, but equity and PTA membership, I love this picture because how just colorfully and wonderfully diverse, from disabilities to gender to presumed religious affiliation to jobs and interest. It really is a beautiful snapshot of the diversity of the families that we have the wonderful opportunities and we get to serve. Equality, equitability in membership, a general approach, no engagement. You kind of just do a general membership drive, and whoever comes, and whoever doesn't. A more equitable approach would be asking every parent. That relationship building will really take you a long way. And don't be discouraged if you this year implement some approaches to a more equitable PTA and you don't see the fruits of your labor, so to speak. You're sowing seeds, and in due time, you or the future generations will benefit from the equitable PTA that you're developing. Equity in governance and leadership. We've talked about just diversifying who serves as our leadership. And yes, we have the general approach of rotating the same leader. I served for 2 years as president, so I can't anymore, so I'm going to go down to treasurer or something. That's great. Sometimes that's what's needed, and it's appropriate, and it's okay. It's not a critique. However, if we want to be more equitable in our governance and leadership, there has to be a plan. There has to be intentionality. The same is true with overcoming structural barriers. For the sake of time, we're going to pause on chatting, but looking at governance and structures, how would you meditate? And please feel free to email me your thoughts after this at martinezcles@gmail.com, martinezcles@gmail.com. Equity in PTA programming, again, we spoke about. It's not the time, it could be the best program, but the best program at the wrong time is not going to give you the results that you're looking for, and it's not going to be the best way for us to invest in the potential of all children. Once again, just some quick examples. A general approach is hosting the same programs annually, having general programs as reading nights versus, for example, having topics that are reading night with topics that are specifically unique to the families that you serve.